set to get wet mean?
Get set to get wet.
Get set to get wet.
I'm very concerned by the more you guys repeat it.
Are you
The more I
suggesting?
hear it, the less
A
it's
bucket of water.
Were you not
opening
set
a
to
door,
get wet?
and I'm imagining Taylor opening a door and Noah and I tossing buckets of water in her face.
Just dumping it on here. Just
Yeah.
all over her.
We should really just have a water balloon fight.
Can I say how weird it is to have 2 beverages on my desk for the Dune episode? It feels kind of cruel.
Yeah,
I also have
gratuitous.
to.
I have 40 ounces of water.
Yeah, we're all ready. We know this
Mm.
is gonna be one.
And
Yeah.
it wasn't distilled from my sweat and urine, so.
Ooh, really living it up
Speaking of
today.
which- Speaking of which,
Get those nose filters fixed and plugged in, kids. We're going hard.
we're gonna be developing calluses by the end of this.
Oh boy, get your worm tooth knife ready to go. We're gonna cut real hard and deep into tonight's subject matter, kids.
Hey, who are you, dear guest?
Ooh, we've got a dear guest today?
We do indeed. The podcast has been going on for a year, and
It's-
because of that, we decided that for the year anniversary, which was 3 days ago, we're gonna have a guest on the podcast again.
It's me, Shelby.
Hello, Shelby. Welcome once again to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Oh my gosh. Well,
Those who watch every episode will recognize her from the Tree of Life episode.
ooh.
Mm.
One of my favorites of our first season episodes, gotta say. It was
My
full
most
of-
traumatizing.
Very chaotic.
It's some
It
real
came at the wrong point in my life. Let's go.
It was rough. It was some fun times, but let us go. I for this season finale, this our 31st or 30th episode, depending on how you count the Halloween special. I am coming at you as your newbie, Noah.
And I'm your host, Shelby.
And I'm your second newbie, Tag Guys 45.
So you guys didn't catch Dune. What's wrong with you?
I
I'm not gonna lie. Before you brought this book up and you recommended me to read it nearly a year ago, in the middle of COVID, I totally had only heard of it very, like maybe twice in passing.
Mm-hmm.
I had heard like how Star Wars can reference it and Trimmers references it, and that was it. So that was it.
Noah, you just gave a look.
I was just well I have a lot of thoughts about Dune and Star Wars because I happened to be reading this at the same time that I was reading the Alan Dean Foster adaptation of the original Star Wars movie that like came out before the movie came out for a friend. And so I'm like hopped up on the Star Wars Dune connections. But
Mm-hmm.
most of my Dune knowledge prior to this event, like for most of my life, Dune was just the worm book. It is the book with the worms, those big old worms on that big old desert planet. That was my knowledge of Dune. And that was just about it until like, I guess, would it be late high school, early college? Whenever I was getting like really into like cape comics, I was reading Miss Marvel. And for those of you that follow Ms. Marvel or don't, as the case may be, you might recall or not that at the start of Volume 2, her brother Amir gets engaged to a girl named Taisha, who is a massive nerd, much like Ms. Marvel, Kamala Khan, our main character. They're massive nerds together. They're super bonded. And Kamala mentions that like Taisha is super cool because she's read all of Dune twice, hated the movies, and then Taisha mentions it's actually how she got into Islam. Taisha is like a very passionate practitioner of Islam, much like a lot of other members of Kamala's family. And so that was really fascinating for me because I had known Dune as just the worm book, but it's Dune and space Muslims. Ooh, that's interesting. What's going on there?
didn't even know it as a worm book. I knew about the book that took place on a desert planet, like Tatooine.
Mm.
But
And now I should probably say how I
Yeah.
was introduced to
why
Dune,
did
right?
you?
Because
Why did you catch that?
Yeah, why did you
Ooh.
decide to read this out of nowhere?
It's a very big book.
It is a big book. Good to hit people over the head with. I was familiar with Dune because I was a big, and still am, a big David Lynch fan. And David Lynch did a famously bad rendition of Dune. In fact, David Lynch hates his version of Dune. I love it. It's sometimes you just love things that are fabulously bad.
Hey, we've been there.
We've been there
Exactly.
in this podcast.
We've been there in this podcast so many times.
So maybe after we finish, the book, we'll have to watch the movie and then do a podcast of the David Lynch
Yes.
movie. I think that sounds fabulous.
I would be so on board for that. I cannot
I'm
stress
here
enough.
for it.
So I was familiar with Dune from that movie, and I thought, wow, this is some wacky shit right here. And I'm sorry, and I don't know if I can cuss on your
You
podcast.
absolutely
There are
can.
no
Like
limits
this all the
on
fucking
this.
time.
Okay.
We had that one
Okay.
resolved in the first episode. Don't you worry.
Okay, thank you. And my very good friend Sally actually got me this book as a Christmas gift, probably a year before I sent it to Taylor to read, because it took me a whole year to get around to reading it as well. But when I read it, I was like, this is so different than any sci-fi I've ever read. And I just found it really compelling and interesting. And there's tons of stuff to talk through about it. We are doing the first part of the first book on this episode, correct?
Yes, correct. Dune, book 1, Dune, which I'm told is most of what this newest movie covers.
Yeah, so I am in the unique position to have also seen the newest movie. As a big fan of Dune, I went and saw it in IMAX, and loved it. But that's
man.
another subject entirely.
IMAX
But
worms.
exactly. So, yes, this new movie covers exactly what we're going to cover that you two have read in the book.
Okay, sounds cool.
Fascinating.
And apparently a little bit more from the fact that Zendaya's playing a character on it.
Yes, which Taylor has not figured out who that character is because she's not encountered her in the book. So it does go a little bit
Actually,
further.
she gets mentioned in like the first chapter with the torture scene. The dreams.
Miss not appearing in this book.
Basically, she doesn't even get a name.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, as I understand it, she barely appears in the movie too. So, maybe there's some parody here.
So I think I should talk about what I thought Taylor's reaction would be, what I thought Noah's reaction would be, now being familiar with you from the previous podcast.
Yeah, we now have an intimate understanding of each other's psychologies.
Yeah,
Boy,
I
you put
even
emphasis on that.
know your middle name. Not true, I don't.
I was about to say, I don't even know his middle name. How do you know his middle name?
I know your middle name.
Yeah, but I put my middle name everywhere.
That is true.
Yeah, it's on her Facebook. Great accomplishment, Noah. Wow, how observant. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's very difficult for me to assess how people are going to react to Dune because I'm always hesitant. I mean, I shared it with Taylor because I know she has the gumption to muscle through a book like that. Like
sci-fi.
yes, like it's not everybody's cup of tea, and even everybody who likes, like, it can be kind of polarizing, but it's like it is the great work of science fiction, and I think anyone who purports to be a science fiction fan should read it at least, but I had no inclinations of whether you would enjoy it. I felt like you both would have very strong opinions about certain characters, which we can explore later on. But yeah, I think I'm curious to hear your reactions.
So I'm just gonna jump in first because I read the book last. I'm still a college student, unlike these two who graduated. And I went slowly through the book, slower than I wanted to. But to be fair, I had to read 2 other novels aside from this one for 2 classes that were also due on Friday. So I really enjoyed the book, so much so that I was able to finish it within 3 days. There's a lot of issues with it. There's so much. But I feel like the book is a good example of how you can write about horrible shit without condoning it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people forget you can write about horrible things happening, and that does not mean you support them.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at all the people who read Game of Thrones and walk away thinking, maybe George R. R. Martin supports incest. No.
No.
I would bet you $100 that Frank Herbert supports giant worms, though. I think that if you walked up to him and were like, giant worms, he would be like, yes, all in on the worms.
I support giant worms.
I am in favor of worms.
Instead of paying $1 million to get a mechanical spider in the 3rd act, he just wants giant worms and everything.
Oh my gosh. He wants Superman to fight the giant worm in the 3rd act.
So also interesting is that Taylor has only read through the first part.
Mm-hmm.
Noah has read quite a bit further, I believe.
Yes.
And I have read the entirety of the first book.
Counting all 3 books I've read this week, I have read over 1,000 pages worth of books. Okay,
Hey, I am not knocking your accomplishments. You are a fabulous reader. I didn't do any reading. I read this book a year ago. So I am just saying Noah and I might be in an interesting dance not to reveal any key plot points that we might discuss in later episodes.
You know, anything, how it goes every Bab 5 episode.
Yeah. Every Bab 5 episode. Every single one.
And I will be poking and prodding them for answers. Those reactions, though.
I'm sure you will be. So, for those listening, this will be only very minor spoilers for the first act of the book, if you're concerned about that. And for those of you who have read it, there's going to be a lot of entertaining dancing going on. Look for that. So
I feel like sometimes I stress you guys out as much as I make this podcast fun.
You don't stress me out at all.
No. It's a gleeful anticipation. Don't worry. So for the sake of those that have not read the book or seen the movies or listened to the audiobooks, played the video games or whatever, Taylor, could you lead us off a bit on a recount of what has happened as it has happened in book 1 of Dune?
Yes, I 100% can. Okay, so here's Dune in a nutshell. You start off following a 14-year-old, 15-year-old boy, what the fuck ever, he's a teenager, named Paul. I know, a very basic name, right? Anyways, he's the Messiah. Shocking! The book opens with him getting tortured by his mother's former teacher to prove that he's human. Because you're either human or you're an animal, and both are part of stocks here. Yeah, no, we are getting straight into eugenicist territory. Paul proves he's human. They might think Paul is the Messiah, but the Reverend's like, nah, he totally isn't. And his mom's like, I think he could be. Meanwhile, his dad is fighting with this evil bad guy named the Baron, who's part of the Harkonnens, who are distant relatives to the Duke. Paul's father, Duke Leto, who's going to be played by Oscar Isaac in the movie. Yeah, see you Star Wars fans.
Yeah.
And so they're fighting. They're distant relatives. The Emperor is also a distant cousin to Duke Leto, and they're fighting. So the Emperor's supporting the Harkonnens, even though he doesn't want to be. And they're all fighting over a desert planet called Arrakis?
Arrakis.
Oh, that puts a lot of emphasis on the A. I like it. Arrakis. They're all fighting over Arrakis, which is a desert planet that produces spice, which is basically the most important material in the whole universe, except for when you're on Arrakis, and then it's water.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Then water is more
then
important.
water, is the most important one. It is still, it doesn't transform into water on Arrakis. It's just, what is the most valuable
water
substance
on Arrakis.
is not spice when you're on Arrakis. Spice is everywhere.
Yeah, spice is everywhere, water is not. And when you're everywhere else, water's everywhere, and spice isn't. Living in the desert's tough. So the whole book follows Duke Leto, Lady Jessica, as Paul's parents, trying to find out who's the spy among them as they move over to Arrakis and try and make deals with the native people to figure out how they're going to live here and how they're going to keep control of the planet so the Harkonnens do not get it back. Because the Emperor gave it to them, but the Emperor's also supporting the Harkonnens to take it back. The Harkonnens hate Duke Leto because he's an Atreides, and they hate the Atreides because they were casted out of the family at one point for running away from a battle one of their ancestors did. Anyways, so that's like the political intrigue, and then you just have Paul slowly but surely unlocking powers throughout the story because he's been trained by magic assassins and also his magic mom. Even though some of the release may not be magic, kind of wondering how much of this was Sherlock Holmes. At the very end, they find out the traitor is the doctor and also one of the teachers of Paul, Dr. Yue, who knew his wife was dead the whole time, but the only reason why he was betraying them was because he wanted confirmation his wife was dead, and he wanted to kill the Baron, who's a evil, trigger warning, he's an evil pedophile. But we won't be talking a lot about that. So there it is. Basically, Dr. Yue kidnaps the Duke, kidnaps Lady Jessica, kidnaps Paul, takes them away from all their security to the Baron. Paul and Lady Jessica escape because Dr. Yue had a plan to help them escape, and then he and Duke Leto die. And it ends with Baron realizing, oh shit, he doesn't have the whole Atreides family, which means this could all go tits up. And
I better get that boy.
yeah, and the book ends with Lady Jessica realizing, man, I may have traumatized my son a little too much with his training. Oh, did I pull a reverend?
Meanwhile, in the corner, Paul is tripping the universe before his entire eyes.
Yeah. That cinnamon fucked him up.
That cinnamon fucked him up.
Oh, good synopsis.
I've been getting better at cutting these down.
You killed it. I loved it.
Really cracked it out there. So how are we gonna attack this nut? Where are we getting at first?
Well, I thought we were going to each discuss our favorite characters first, correct? For a fun dive into individual preference.
Okay.
Ooh, let's go.
How do we decide? Who had the most recent birthday? Mine was in July.
October 16th.
Yeah, you go first.
Okay.
It's hard to pick a favorite character. I'm just going to say all the adults that are not total jackasses. So, Howard and Gurney Halleck. Gurney Halleck and Howard. Yeah.
All two of them.
Yeah, the two of them.
Okay, so let's talk about Gurney first and why you like Gurney. Because I also love Gurney. He's one of my top. He's not my favorite, but he is also in my tops.
Absolutely a solid character.
Total amazing character. Real quick, because I said he was my favorite, and I guess we're going me first. I liked him because even though he's supposed to be like the arms master who teaches Paul how to protect himself and fight, he's one of 3 people who teach him this. But he's also a musician. And when the chapter before he gets introduced begins with a quote of his song lyrics, so I thought this was like some big historic person from the past who Paul was going to read about, and then he's right there.
Mm-hmm. And truly larger than life presence.
Larger than life, so helpful, genuinely cares about Paul and how is he going to survive. And even though he's religious, not all of his songs are straight up like just Bible quotes, and I appreciate that.
Hmm. Who doesn't love a warrior minstrel?
Yes, he would be the bard class.
Mm-hmm.
He's got it all figured out. He's fun. He is very fun. Oh, man.
And tell us about Hawat.
Yes, please.
He is the other guy who's training Paul how to fight. Sorry if I seem a little distracted. I'm making social media posts for us all right now for the podcast.
Oh, okay.
Let me hit go on that tweet I've been sitting on this whole time.
Anyways, so he is a Mentat, which is basically a magic assassin. That's how I'm going to explain him right now. Fake Assassin's Creed meets
computer.
Actually, no, Assassin's Creed is computer. Fake Assassin's Creed meets with like Inception levels of thinking, like just going in there. He also genuinely cares about Paul, and I feel like there's so few people who just care about Paul's safety and not that he might be a messiah. So I'm here for it.
He needs that support.
He does.
He needs that support, and I'm sorry, his mom and dad are not it.
Oh my gosh. Not it.
Haywit or Howitt, he's also just hilarious. He has to do, he's the second busiest person to the Duke, and sometimes he's busier than the Duke, but he never once gets mad at anybody for how busy he is. Also, he's the guardian of this family. He's served the last 3 Dukes, and he never once feels like he should have died in place of the previous Dukes, and I love that. Like, yes, he's not completely mentally healthy, but at least he doesn't think he deserves to die.
Yeah.
My standards are really low for those kinds of characters. I don't know what to tell y'all.
Hey, he's the best of the best. He's the best of the best Mentat, so he's cool.
He is so cool.
So cool.
So much better than his character. So much better than the character who foils him.
Oof, Piter.
Fucking Peter.
Piter is a lot. He is another classic archetype.
Oh man, there is so much about him. That is just so much.
So, to clarify for listeners, Hawat is the Mentat of the Atreides family, right? Because all of these super powerful families have their own human computers that they use. And Peter is the Mentat of the Harkonnens, the evil counterpart of the Atreides that Taylor mentioned earlier, who are just disgusting, horrible people. You imagine them to be warty and oozing and bulbous.
I don't know if they're all horrible.
They're not all horrible.
Definitely
That's true.
The Baron is like the fat phobic caricature. Like I struggle to think of another character in fiction that like is that caricature so badly, with the possible exception of Jabba the Hutt, actually.
Jabba the Hutt. That was the only other one I could think of too, Noah.
It's like he's gross and evil in terms of morals and personality and goals, and also he's fat and evil because he's fat, and also a pedophile, and holy cow.
Herbert? Yeah. Yes. So I do agree with you, Taylor, that the Harkonnens are not all evil, but it is, by contrast, a very like oppressive culture, right? So the Atreides are a commerce-driven culture, and if we think of the Harkonnen home planet and their type of economy, it's a slave-based economy. So that's also a really interesting thing, is their culture is a culture of enslavement and punishment and suffering.
Not originally, though. Because
No.
they are a split off of the Duke's family. So they but also would have originally been from Caladan.
Exactly. Okay, so Taylor mentioned her two favorites. Noah, would you like to go next?
Oh, I think I'll let
Or
you
do you
go
need...
next. I think I
Okay.
will go last.
Okay, that's actually perfect, because my favorite character is actually the third weapons trainer of Paul Atreides, and
Oh,
that would be Mr. Duncan Idaho.
great name.
Super fighter pilot, sexy as hell. All the ladies love him, and I think I am so drawn to Duncan because in the course of this first book, he kind of serves as like a cultural anthropologist for the Fremen, right? So he is the representative of the Atreides, and he is tasked with going on out into the middle of nowhere on a fucking desert planet, and meeting a totally different culture. Like, you might not even speak the same language as these people, and he kicks ass doing it. He makes all of these awesome friends. He comes back basically Fremen, like, in to me, he is just such an all-around good guy, compelling character, like the classic like hot hero.
And then he's coming in clutch at the end to help save Paul and Jessica from the Harkonnen invasion. Like, a stud, absolutely. With a great name, just the best name in this book.
Duncan Idaho. Yeah.
Duncan Idaho.
Might I also say, played by Jason Momoa, without a beard, which was a little alarming in the new Dune.
He's played by fucking Jason Momoa.
I thought he was like
movie?
Stilgar or something.
No, Stilgar is no, that Jason Momoa is Duncan Idaho.
Ooh.
Yeah!
Ooh, that's spicy.
That might make me like him a little bit more. I'm not gonna lie. I was mad at Duncan by the end of this book.
Ooh.
So spicy.
Jason Momoa Duncan. I'm excited.
I can't think of who plays Stilgar right now. If the name comes to me, I'll say it randomly later. But Javier Bardem. Like, I personally really loved the casting of the new movie, but that's a different topic.
Oh, yeah.
Duncan Idaho to me is just, he is all around lovable, amazing character. And he treats Paul in almost like a big brotherly type of way, which is really endearing, but he also is like, he's one of the greatest fighters in the known universe. So he's just, I even like that he's a little arrogant sometimes too,
Some
I
fun
definitely
hitters.
get that. He's a fun kind of arrogant where, like, it's hard to be mad at him.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like being mad at a puppy.
I think for my favorite, I struggled with this one because for me, I really, truth be told, I really didn't like. I was having fun, but I didn't fully click with the book until partway through book 2, which we're not covering today. But if I had to pick from the selection available in book 1 specifically, honestly, the character that I found most compelling was Leto. Actually, I thought that the Duke was really interesting. Like, he's coming into this new planet that has been handed over in a process that is clearly meant to like backstab him for basically just like some stock like gimmicks, just like to raise the value of spice for a period of time. That is mostly why he's getting ganked here. And
it's
so
also because he's the closest living relative to the Emperor and can usurp him.
Like,
yes, he is a direct threat to the Emperor.
Princess Irina mentions that at the beginning of one of the chapters.
he's got this serious like bad hand dealt to him
Yeah.
for a number of reasons. Uh, and I don't know. I like how the book opens with some very like, with like the Reverend Mother and Jessica and basically anybody that knows anything, like coming up to Paul and being like, "Oh yeah, he's totally gonna die. Your dad is screwed. This is
Yeah.
going to go badly." And then you spend you spend these big chunks of the book like with Leto specifically. There'll be these moments where Paul is asleep or Paul isn't there and we're just watching Leto in the war room or plotting or having a binary sunset moment outside of like one of his, planning chambers. And you're just sort of sitting there with him and you're watching him absorb the information and you're really trying to get in there and figure out, is he going to make it? Is there any chance at all? Because he seems to have a number of interesting counter plans and ways that he can play the Harkonnens against himself. He has this really interesting idea of trying to contact the Fremen, which most of the Empire just dismisses as this tiny population of savages. And he thinks, no, these are the people that understand the desert. And it's people that control the desert that are going to control the spice that's going to control, well, the rest. And I don't know. Like on an emotional level, I just found it really like, I don't know, heartbreaking, tragic.
Mm-hmm.
You want to hope for him.
Man's last plea to cling to life.
You want to believe that he can make it because he seems like a guy that like is as decent as you can hope for in this current system.
It feels like he deserves to make it.
He does.
I don't know about deserves,
And
but
he's
it
cute.
looks like he's smart enough to survive. And he figured out all the Harkonnens' plans. He knew everything the Harkonnens were going to do, except he never found out who the spy was.
Yeah.
And that's why he died.
Major Mufasa vibes.
Oh yeah, that's exactly it.
I don't know about that.
He is very Mufasa, like, and that's why I'm so glad he's Oscar Isaac, because it has to be somebody really hot. And also, just got that sort of like noble, I want to believe that you can make it, but also I could see you kind of tragically falling on your sword there. Like,
yeah, it's really compelling to me how gracefully he walks into his own death sentence. Because I mean, he knows that's what it is.
Yeah, he's just the gravitas off him. That's what brings me to him.
And I think it's very cool with the parallel if you think of his father facing down the bull and the bull killing his father.
Oh, yeah.
The bull killed his father when his father had his back turned to him.
Or his grandfather or something. I can't quite remember, right? But the bull, and I think that's a really cool analogy almost. It's like he in a really real political sense was facing down the bull and suffered the same kind of consequences, being killed from behind.
Man, I hadn't even thought of that, but totally, yeah.
I really feel like that's why Lady Jessica wanted the painting of his father and the bull's head to be in the entrance leading to the political talks, not the dining room. Because she felt like if they were there, then that would be a constant reminder to prevent the Duke from making the same mistake. But that's never directly said. That's me hypothesizing. Because I read way super into all of the Lady Jessica parts.
I am curious about what she has against it, because that's like explicitly stated as the reason why she doesn't eat with him.
Hates him. She hates the former Duke. The Duke's father, she hates him. Oh, she hates him. And I love it. I want to know why.
I want to know why, too.
Oh.
Do you not find out in these 3 books? What the fuck? She outright states how she hates the old Duke and how her Duke would be better if he had never known his father. But we don't know why.
I mean, there are prequel books.
Okay.
You've had your moments.
So, do we want to move on to a character that isn't a favorite, that none of us mentioned, but we all really enjoy, and who is a really interesting highlight in the middle of this, in this book here, who really does kind of come out of left field. In the middle of all these things, we got Dr. Kynes, who has got some fascinating stuff going on. Because Dr. Kynes, well, he is his official name is like the planet ecologist, but he goes by an older term, the planetologist. He is responsible. He's the Imperial sort of official, terraformer, basically. He is responsible for looking at Arrakis and seeing, okay, how does this work? Is there any way that we can make this better? How does the whole system together? And he also is kind of a massive bigwig in this particular political maneuvering that's happening, because as the Harkonnens are leaving and the Atreides are coming in, there has to be an Imperial representative there to make sure that everything is going along fair and that nothing's getting, done to, really screw over the Atreides. Except, of course, screwing over the Atreides is the whole point, so he's a bit biased. But that's not his fault.
He can't help it. The Emperor's just his boss.
Oh, he can totally help it. Fuck that guy. I'm taking a different approach. He has the complete ability to make his own decisions and to manipulate the field to his own advantage. He's shown that multiple times, and the fucker chose not to.
The real kind of like twist that makes him interesting that we kind of see here, there's this dinner scene, which is where the politics gets cranked to 10. We have the fighting proper hasn't really started yet, but we all know that things are going to go bad very quickly. And it's Paul, Jessica, Duke Leto, Halleck's over in the corner, jamming away on a string instrument that I forget the name, balisette.
A basilet. I remember it because it looks like basilisk.
We've got an array of appropriately colorful murder mystery type characters that have arrived for this evening spectacle. We've got,
It is very murder mystery.
It's straight up a scene out of Clue if all the characters were sitting at a dinner table.
A little bit, yeah, I love that.
Oh, man. Oh, oof. Chris Knives Out. You got one of the major water salesmen is in here, but we also got the big smuggler boy off in the corner, but shh, it's secret. We got Dr. Kynes, planetologist, massive boy, and a handful of other people that come in here. Everybody's
Paul and Jessica.
Paul and Jessica, who are also there.
Paul. We're just totally ignoring Paul, the whole main character of this thing, but we'll get to him eventually.
Get to Paul.
But anyway.
He's so boring right now.
And that's not his fault. He does not know enough to be interesting right now.
He's a child.
He is actually a child.
That's the problem.
I mean,
children are not children in this book are not as interesting as all the adults in this book. And that's not his fault.
So, Noah, what did you find compelling about the dinner scene that you were describing?
Well, we got a lot of it's a great kind of episode of world building and character building, and it's really where we get to see Arrakis politics specifically, because we've talked about Imperial level and some of the great houses politics as we explain all of the setup that has to be done to understand what's going on with the Atreides and the Harkonnen and the Imperial throne. That all gets summed up in chapter 2 because it's a lot, and you kind of have to sit through 2 or 3 different PowerPoints from different perspectives to make sure you understand it. Or you do if you're me and politics aren't your thing. But when it gets here, we finally get to see what it's like specifically for the bigwigs on Arrakis. We get to see the wants and needs and the ongoing conflicts and some of the pressure points. For example, in this universe, they have weather control technology, but for some reason, Arrakis hasn't been granted access to these satellites by the guild that controls all of space and satellite technology. And when some people start to propose that, we start to see some hackles go up. For some reason, I don't know why, a water salesman doesn't like the idea of rain. It's crazy.
But more interesting, it's Kynes and Tuick who say that won't be possible.
Yes, because Kynes is the planetologist. So you would think if anyone would know the most accurate possibilities for the planet Arrakis, it would be Kynes.
But Kynes is a freeman. Not by birth, but culturally he has assimilated into the Freeman Society. And Tuick is Freeman born. but is now a smuggler. And you can tell by his physical appearance, the blue upon blue eyes. And there's other descriptions for him too. And Tuick is the smuggler that Lady Jessica invited, but she didn't invite any of the freeman political leaders besides Kynes and Tuick. And Tuick doesn't really count. So that had Leto upset. Leto was like, why didn't you invite any of the common people, Jessica? He's like, I invited the smuggler who could get us off world if we needed to leave. And he
She's
was like,
thinking
that's
ahead.
not where we're going.
We planned for the
it.
success. We planned for the success.
Not the failure. Basically, that's what's going on with them. But I find it really interesting because it's the two people who live on the world and have to deal with the struggle of water the most who don't want the weather to be there. And that gets revealed at the end of the book because the freemen control the water and the spice. They don't have to worry about it as much as anyone coming off planet has to.
Go ahead, Noah.
Oh, there's this extra, like, interesting implication that comes out. And Kynes, like, really backs off of it the moment that he, like, lets it slip. But he starts going off on his favorite subject, which is, of course, the ecology of Arrakis. And he talks about the, like, the desert life forms and the things that have adapted and the various ways that things work and life works out here. And he starts to get into this sort of theory, this idea that it would only take a little bit of extra water in the right places, and you could kickstart ecology. You could make an entire biosystem that works, and
that is natural to the planet,
and would thrive and spread and resolve all the issues that Arrakis has, being covered with sand and not soil, and not having any way to like hold on to water. But he
all
stops.
The current issues. He does admit that there would be others that would arise from it, which shows that even when he's going off, he's staying on task. Like, I know more problems will crop up, but those aren't the big ones right now.
And when Jessica goes after him about it, like, so what do you mean by how much water? Is there enough water? Could we do that? Kind of like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm an angry scientist and I don't want to talk about it anymore.
I think Kynes and Lady Jessica are going to end up getting together by the end of this series.
Oh, yeah?
And that is because Lady Jessica talks about how much she wants natural flora to spread over the planet before the dinner scene. And Kynes is immediately stuck to her like glue. During the dinner scene, when Lady Jessica asks, he starts to answer, but then stops and hesitates. And the Duke's like, no, why don't you continue? And he goes too heavy-handed, and Kynes shuts off.
Oh, Leto.
The moment it's not Lady Jessica and it's the Duke, he's fucking done.
My thing, though, is, so Herbert has said, and his son has said both that spice is analogous to, like, oil. Right, oil on planet Earth.
I totally
is a finite resource, and I think of how we talk about moving away from the use of oils and non-renewable resources in the United States. But what happens when we talk about that? The people who make money from it are like, hell no. And this is kind of a similar thing that's being portrayed in this really weird, politically intimate. Like, and we don't personally get to see those moments in our own government and culture, and so it's really almost it feels very
the room where it happened.
Yeah, the room where it happened. It has that feel. This scene has that feel, and but if we're talking about terraforming Arrakis, then what happens to the worms? What happens to the worms that live in the desert? What happens to the spice that is mined from the desert? What happens to, this invaluable resource? If we are taking away spice land, it's like taking away land for any other kind of like income-driven resource.
So, I've only read the first book. But it seems like the worms produce the spice. not the spice feeds the worms. And if the worms produce the spice, then the more you move away from it, the less you have to fight the worms for the spice, and the smaller their ecosystem could become, while still manageable, because there will be so much spice, they wouldn't have to fight so hard to keep it, which means their population would start to dwindle because resources would become unlimited for a time, which causes a temporary explosion before dwindling due to population growth, and then they would shrink again. So that would actually, this is a working theory.
Mm-hmm.
If that happens,
I love your working theories.
If that happens and they stop using spice, then the worms themselves will become less of a problem. There will be years where they'll be more of a problem than others, but they won't be as territorial. And eventually, creatures can learn that humans are good and helpful, and humans are bad and evil sometimes, depending on the ecosystem.
Oh, you're talking about like spice farming versus spice harvesting.
Yep. If you don't fight the worms for the spice, eventually they could learn, depending on their intelligence, that they don't have to go after the shields anymore to keep their spice. Which could leave the people alone. But that's like applying real world like ecology theory and like recorded sentences to a fantasy sci-fi book. So maybe the author didn't go that way. But that's my working theory with it.
There definitely seems to be a real infatuation with real world ecology and colonialism and like the history thereof in this book. You know, the opening quotes in just about every chapter has something to do with like either actual like revelations about the in-universe history and politics and what future characters thought about stuff, or how characters relate to their history, or to like, you know, the damage that has been done by people from the past, or, you know, how these things have been constructed. It's very interested in the way that the world is built by the actions of the people of the past and the repercussions and the emergent systems that those create.
It's funny how the world of Dune is so like sci-fi and outer space, but when you think about it on those levels, it's very familiar.
Mm-hmm.
And then the book itself, the processes of the book feel very familiar to what we do now.
It's definitely my favorite kind of world building, like or a fantasy world, I guess, you know, of one where there's this very keen understanding that stuff happens for a reason, which is kind of the core of most world building. Really, it's an endless cycle of, okay, if this were true, what else would have to be true to make that happen, and then just continually back and forward pedaling to see what happens when you start a system there.
That's why the best way to world build your book is to not always start with specific characters, but start with what are the animals and how did the animals come about? What kind of plants would the animals eat? If you start with local nature, then you can spread to history and cultures that were born from that, because human culture is directly born from their living conditions. It's late, guys. I've been at work all day and I have to work in the morning. Like, I couldn't think of the words to save my life.
No shame to Ms. McCaffrey, but I definitely feel like Dune's answer to the question, how did we get here, feels a lot less convoluted and constructed than how McCaffrey came to her how did we get here. She answers the question in a very interesting and elaborate way, but her method of getting to how can we have a culture full of people that rise on dragons that aren't fighting wars but still have a reason to ride on dragons is very convoluted and specific relative to this one, which feels a lot more drawn from real world history.
And nuanced.
Yeah.
I don't know what you guys are referencing, but
it's another book. It's a sci-fi book series we've read on the podcast, which also is a huge spanning children's series.
Okay.
And not so children's series.
I'm only 3 books in. But okay, so if we're talking about like real world influences and how this feels very based in our world, can we talk about the views of pain and the cultures in this book?
Yeah, and I think we should specifically, Taylor mentioned the opening sequence of the book, in which the Reverend Mother, the lead Bene Gesserit, I call them witches, right? They're not necessarily witches. Like
It's
it's
a
almost
good term for them.
an insult that people use against them too, right? There are these
It's
feared,
absolutely an insult.
yeah, there are these feared and revered women who are really good fighters and very intuitive. But this opening sequence, the Reverend Mother is using a poison needle to Paul's neck, and she has his hand in a trap. And if he pulls his hand from the trap, he is going to get killed with this poison needle, right? It's a test. It's a test of Paul's humanity. And he asks the Reverend Mother what's in the box, and she says pain. And it is the way it's described, he describes his hand blistering and charring and turning to dust in this box. And he survives the test. But I was asking earlier when we were kind of riffing, why was pain the test of humanity, and how is that kind of a theme that carries through this book?
So I think
Taylor, you mentioned pain.
I think it's very clear that the Bene Gesserit really truly do believe that you have to experience pain to grow as individuals and be able to open not really a third eye, but your mind to the world and the way it works. If you cannot understand the pain of the world, then you cannot understand the world. Seems very much to be part of their philosophy. I think that's bullshit. But that is how they operate. You're human if you can experience pain and grow past it, and you're an animal if you can't. Because animals, given the base instincts, when they feel pain, they either fight or fly.
And the Reverend Mother even says that specifically to Paul. She says an animal caught in a trap will gnaw its own limb off to get free. And I play around with this a lot. Like, I have thought about this a lot and what this means. And I am trying to think, like, I lost my thought. I'm sorry, guys. I lost it. I had it once. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, if I may go ahead, actually, that quote you mentioned really gets me going, because I could, and I may yet, go on like a tangent in the same direction, as Tiger Eyes, on the subject of the implicit and at times explicit assumption in a lot of the characters, not just the Bene Gesserit. We have a lot of conversations about how to pronounce these words. We did not agree to any specific pronunciation beforehand. We just thought we'd wing it, and we are wunging it, may I say.
Yeah. No shame for spelling and no shame for pronunciation.
Thank you, Shelby.
The words are made up and the points don't matter.
Thank you, Noah. You're finally coming around to my worldview.
This is really this is character growth. This is my season arc.
I'm not pulling you down to my level. I'm lifting you up to it.
So there's an overarching assumption that pain and suffering breeds strength, whereas having what you need and having comfort breeds weakness. I could go on a tangent there, but you mentioned specifically the idea that she mentions that an animal will bite its leg off to get out of a trap. But what makes a human then, I guess, would be the capacity to go against your first instinct. And what seems to define so much of the Bene Gesserit, I'm going to pronounce it that way, practices isn't just their ability to like use a spooky voice or fight cool. It's their self-control. Some of the training that Paul has received, most of it that he mentions actually have to do with the ability to overcome fear or to gain an awareness of one's own body. They are all about mind over base matter. There's this sense, I think, that what makes a human in that sense then would be the ability to kind of transcend basic survival instincts. It kind of reminds me of this line from Babylon 5, another sci-fi series that we've covered in this podcast, where an old philosopher teacher friend shows up to talk to our favorite philosopher teacher character and quizzes them spontaneously about the principles of sentient life, and mentions that the third one is the capacity to sacrifice for a higher cause, a purpose, a brother, a loved one, and how that is part of what defines someone as a person. And it's interesting how those two kind of echo off of each other, because they're both about going against what an animal would do. It's just one of them is a bit more eugenicsy about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's funny because we were discussing this earlier, and I jokingly said we were talking about suffering, and I said it's what makes us resilient. And I was kind of being facetious, and Noah, you were like, no, that's not like, that's true. It's true. It's kind of like this thing where we wish it wasn't the case. We wish we didn't have to go through this pain and suffering, but people do all the time.
I would argue, what kind of set me off was that it definitely seems to be what is true as the assumption of the characters in the book. I'm not sure. Yeah. It is an interesting topic for discussion, truthfully, because I'm not sure how true it is in the real world. I think that
No, I don't know either. I think history is represented a lot of times as pain and suffering, right? And that's especially if we talk about the white male perspective. And Herbert was a white male writing this book in the 60s. But
Lord knows that we like to talk about how pain and suffering makes us cool bad boys, but we're not exactly the ones going through the most pain and suffering, truth be told.
And a lot of times collaborative efforts, if we're talking about like war and pain and suffering, like collaboration and cooperation are going to be a lot more effective tools for, creating positive, productive culture. So I see what you're saying.
I'm gonna jump in here real quick because this book is really allowing me to show off all of my anthropology studies.
Do it.
Pain making you resilient is not always true. There are individuals who experience pain and become more resilient because of it. However, you can break anybody by putting too much pain on them at once. Everybody has a breaking point. Some people's breaking points can be trained and increased. However, other people, their breaking point is the one they are born with and conditioned to learn. And you don't always have to introduce them to pain in order for them to be conditioned to become more resilient. Learning self-care routines and just self-reflecting are a lot of ways you can increase your resilience to certain kinds of physical and emotional pain. Physical pain is often seen as like there's a definitive answer for how much you can take. However, everybody biologically is different in that regard. Mental and emotional pain, though, that can change over the years just as your physical condition of your body does. Something that really makes me think about how pain works with this world and why the Bene Gesserit really do believe pain separates humans from animals is because it's classism. It's completely classism. And the whole Bene Gesserit is based around politics and religion. And there's two big schools. There's one that's based around religion, and there's one that's based around politics. And the Bene Gesserit are supposed to be based around politics, but they are just as religious as the other school. And I really do they really do mirror how like universities got started. When universities were started, it was the wealthy men who were sent to universities to learn how to become priests and like continue on spreading the gospel to other towns. However, in this book, it's not the wealthy men, it's the wealthy women who are sent to this school, separated from their families, and taught everything about the religion and the politics of the world. And then it is their leaders who decide, the people who run the school who decide who they will get married to. And they even admit sometimes they marry family members to each other, but the women have never grown around their families. So that's supposed to dull the biological repulsion that is within humans to resist the urge to mate with relatives. And trigger warning, this is going to go off on a little bit of tangent, but there is a biological response that are in humans, and it's stronger in some than in others, where if you really do just reject the smell of close relatives, like you can't stand the sweat of like your sibling, it's even more grotesque than it is for like a complete and total stranger. Sweat is gross no matter what. I guess it really depends. Anyways.
Not unless you're a Fremen with a still suit.
Yes, then your sweat, but then your sweat does matter.
I was about to say, when I'm out doing an archaeological job, the smell of sweat doesn't bother me as much as like if I'm in my house and I smell sweat. So it really depends on the situation. But that is actually an innate biological reaction that is in humans to prevent that from happening, to prevent incest, because incest can cause biological harm. However, that can be dampened through certain methods. And I'm going off on a tangent, but it seems like the Bene Gesserit are really fucking taking advantage of that. And they're twisting it to be useful in the way that they keep the upperclassmen away from the lower stocks. Because they refer to everyone who doesn't get tested to be human as animals and being part of the upper and lower stocks in the very first chapter.
So,
and you forget it with everything else that happens, but it's right there.
So can you like go back and like pull around a bit and kind of connect that? How do you see that as connecting to the Bene Gesserit view on pain defining a human?
Because obsession with pain is something that appears in religion as well. The pain of Jesus Christ for Christians. Like, people are very focused on his death. Sometimes even more so than his life. They're focused on the people who were in pain, who he helped.
There's also virtue in pain to a certain, and in this perspective, in a religious perspective, there is virtue to pain. Our worth is defined by how much we suffer.
Exactly. Thank you, Shelby. And like, I don't know, when I was reading, I just kept going back to that kind of stuff. Like, their obsession with pain comes from their religion. Their religion comes from the past before they lost all of this. It's born from our history, even though we don't know our history anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That's also how, like, I read this whole book as being Spanish imperials.
That's a topic worth discussing at some point. We've been on this for a while, but I do want to hear, Shelby, your kind of last thoughts. You know, now that we've had a bit of real world context about the actual current understanding of pain and the human capacity thereof and how that relates to strength, what do you think of the assumption taken here by everybody, actually, literally everybody in this book?
Everybody in the book.
That suffering is what breeds strength. And in fact, that seems to be almost taken as an assumption in the world building itself, that these people that are in the most extreme environments are going to be the ones that are the best at everything bar none. You know, be it fighting, be it survival, be it, politicking, whatever. These, the people that suffer the most are going to work out the greatest. What do you think that implicit underlying, belief translates to? What does that mean?
Yeah, I don't know. I think if we're talking in like a colonial context, right, we're talking about especially the Fremen, right? I think of the Fremen, you talk about the Fremen just suffer existing on their planet. It's not even like anyone is exacting suffering on them. They just live hard lives. And I think we're going back, I'm thinking about this religious analogy, right? That like you toil and you toil and you toil. But I also think of the perspective where, if you meet people in your life, there's this difference between privilege, the haves and the have-nots, right? And we talk about people who have privilege, like the Emperor, the Harkonnens, even the Atreides. They have this privilege. They haven't had to suffer. I mean, historically, really. And in this book, we are seeing the Atreides suffer greatly. And so I almost think of it as a commentary on, like, sometimes people of privilege have to go through that life adversity to be able to relate to common folk who do suffer on a different kind of level, right? So Paul has to go through this transformational suffering so that he can relate to the Fremen.
Holy shit. That is actually
which would make him a great
Luke Leto
leader.
Literally believes his house is lesser because they are suffering in the moment, but he acknowledges that suffering in the moment brings him closer to the Freemen and makes it worth it. Sorry, I just totally remembered that happened. Fuck.
And it's like they're grooming Paul to be the greatest leader of all time, and how can he be the greatest leader of all time if he doesn't go through some kind of intense adversity?
It's funny. I have such like a visceral negative reaction to this kind of worldview. The idea that
I
suffering,
know, I can see it.
and so much of it does tie to kind of like that religious background where it's used as like a carrot and a stick. Like, oh, you go through the misery, you'll get what you want. And I
Yeah.
also like don't love it because of its connection to a lot more like authoritarian and kind of fascy belief. The idea that
Yes.
like
Mhm.
we've got to suffer, we've got to promote suffering actually, because if we make ourselves miserable, we'll survive. But there is a kind of, I don't know, kind of almost like a naive, like a justice to it in this world. Like, it's not a stick and a carrot here. It is taken as like a given fact about humanity almost. And it's, I don't know, almost framed as like a positive thing. Like, yeah, you have these big, powerful people, but by lack of their suffering, they're not going to have the strength that the Sardaukar or the Fremen are going to have. And that being a consistent rule for everyone is kind of the most justice that we get in the world building.
Mhm.
Here's my issue with that take. I agree with you for the most part, Noah, and I also hate this review because everything has to be given in measure. Uh, there's a point where when you suffer too much, you're just not going to grow from it anymore. And there's a lot of things that you can grow from without having to experience suffering. So I really hate this worldview, but the book itself says those people are better strength-wise. They are better fighters, they are better physically strong.
Mm-hmm.
However, that does not mean they are stronger in all senses. They aren't stronger politically wise. Yes, the Freemen have control of their own planet, but the Sardaukar don't really have control over anything without the Emperor backing them.
No, exactly.
They
They
are
have no
stronger.
power. They have
Yeah.
all this kind of like, superficial physical power, but they have no
Mm.
mental fortitude.
Oh, you're
And
right there. You got me there.
we haven't seen, I personally haven't seen enough of the Freemen to see if they actually do have, if they were to leave their planet, I don't think they would have the same kind of strength as Paul would if he were to leave.
They have home
Because
field
his
advantage.
name carries more weight. Because again, classism.
Oh, I cannot wait for you to read this rest of this book.
Oof. We're going to be talking about this subject a lot over the course of the rest of the episodes that we do about Dune, I think.
Pain and suffering.
It,
I would
oof.
like to point out too, one of the things I love most about Dune, if I can put a nice little neat bow on this. I don't know, do we have any more in that we haven't touched before?
Prophecies, anthropology, Atreides.
We have,
Okay, so
yeah, we got just a handful of stuff there.
okay, so about what we've talked about. So the two things we've really talked about,
Mm-hmm.
right, are we talked a lot about the ecology and the politics of the planet. And ironically enough, we've also talked a lot about like culture and psychology. And that's one of the things I love about Dune is that he is a book of both like the hard and soft sciences, right? So if we talk about the hard and soft sciences, like psychology and anthropology are these like soft sciences, and then
Mm-hmm.
he's got like ecology, politics, even
Noah,
some
these
kind
are
of
the
like,
actual terms used.
huh?
No, I
Noah
know, I
laughs,
know.
but these are the actual
I
terms
just
used.
think it's funny, and I hope we bring those terms up again if we ever get into a comparison between the Mentats and the Bene Gesserit at some point.
Right. And then it's just interesting too to think of if we think of power, right? Power, because
Mm.
there's soft power, there's hard power, there's feminine power, there's masculine power.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Herbert really does a fun job of pulling all of these multi-level,
Mm-hmm.
multi-component things and weaving the themes throughout all of this on that kind of binary level of hard science and soft science.
Oh yeah,
Holy shit!
absolutely.
This is the tree of life conversation. Soft power versus hard power, nature versus grace, religion
Whoa.
versus human.
Okay, run away very fast.
Ah! Shit, we've come back. Well, your topics always go back to this. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just,
Are you saying my life is pain and suffering?
no, I'm saying
You might be right.
you
Just
very
kidding.
much, I'm saying you very much find the duel interesting and you like comparing the two and then also separating them and comparing them again.
Yep. I do.
The duo. I'm not saying anything bad about you. I love you, and I love the way your mind works. I just totally did not make that connection until just now.
I didn't either. I love it. Thank you for pointing it out.
I mean, we haven't even got to the Nietzsche quote you wanted to do. You might be about to pull out some like master and slave morality on us and reveal that this has all been about getting us to finally read some theory for once.
Oh no, I did talk about a Nietzsche quote earlier from when we were discussing, and it's funny because I think it's really like, I'm like, maybe this is like Herbert's whole perspective. I was like, maybe he read this quote and he's like, I'm gonna write a book about this universe. And it's like, to live is to suffer, to survive is to find some meaning in suffering, right? And so we talk about this is what we've been talking about, like the defining factors, like the Bene Gesserit are like, yeah, you suffer, but you are surviving it. And that's the meaning, is you're gonna make it through. You survive.
I don't remember who said this, and I might be paraphrasing an actual quote, but that really makes me think of the counter, which is, living is dying, but you only truly die if you never live. Because the moment you're born, your time is ticking down and you are walking towards the day you die, but you're only truly dead if you don't take a chance at living.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like those two quotes together are pretty much the point of this book.
Right.
And like, it may seem like they're opposites, but they actually go fucking hand in hand. It's just one's focused on suffering and the other one's focused on like timely death, which is basically Lady Jessica and the Duke.
What I am curious about, and this is, I have not finished the book. So, there may be further context that Shelby has in this that even I don't have. But what I am interested in is there's so much of these asides about comfort and having all of your needs met being kind of, a honey trap. A thing that is going to make you weak or make you, sloppy in some way. And we can get into discussion about how much, suffering needs to be maintained, or we have to, constantly be on our guard or something like that, which may or may not be worth getting into. But the actual promise of comfort, the story of this book, this first part, is about that going away, about watching people that have had comfort finally be exposed to everything else. And what I am curious is if in the rest of the book, at any point, do we get the chance to kind of see characters have that chance for relaxation, a chance to just live for a while, offered to them, and just see how they react to that. Because I would be interested to see, how does this get reincorporated? Is the answer the fascist one, that you have to ignore it all the time? We have to always be getting ready for war? Or is it going to be we can have maybe a little piece as a treat?
Yeah. Well, and I was thinking too, while you were saying these things, I was like, if we ask the Fremen, do you suffer? What do you think their answer would be? Like, probably not. This is just their home. This is where they live. You know what I mean? So so you're talking about comfort and Paul and the Atreides leaving the comfort of Caladan and their home. And it's like, but the Fremen are home.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you got me there.
So maybe we'll see some comfort on those levels.
On another note, them losing their comfort does not automatically make them better people. And that's important to note. Yes, it makes them more self-aware, but it's not them having to face difficulty that makes them better people. It's them realizing, oh, other people go through this constantly. I need to learn more. It's not the suffering that makes them better. It's the realization that they have more to learn and they try and learn it.
Well, I would say that you really, we got to get to book 2 at some point, quickly, because that is a lot of book 2, is seeing how they react as they get thrown out, literally, into the wilderness.
Okay.
Into the eye of the storm.
Into the eye of the storm, she says. That
ending is my one complaint about this book, because when Duke Leto is being talked to by Baron, the Baron says, "Do we not know where Howitt or Duncan, Idaho, or Halleck is?" And Peter's just like, "Nah, we have no fucking clue." And then he tries to say, and like the Duke's like, "Okay, so they all made it." Then somebody gets captured, but nobody knows who it is. And the Duke's like, "Is it Duncan?" Like, motherfucker, why don't the people who captured this guy know who he is?
They don't have cell phones. They got rid of their computers.
Yeah, they killed all the robots.
Okay, but I'm assuming they're torturing him on the ship. Like, why don't you find out the identity before you start hypothesizing? Who could it be? Is it that famous Duncan, Idaho guy? Who it wasn't because he got saved. But, like, I don't know. That annoyed the shit out of me. Like,
This feels like
Do
a
you
Baron
not
you bring
know-
good news to as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
do you not know who the three most important members of the inner circle, besides Dr. Yue, look like for your enemy?
Nope.
Nope. Not an ounce of
No,
competency.
apparently not.
You know,
Not an
there-
ounce of competence in the Harkonnen horde.
that is the thing. They are kind of the antithesis of this implicit, like, suffering breeds competency and strength. The Harkonnen military structure is
All they do is
entirely
suffer.
based around, like, Megatron style bullying a bunch of people that don't know how to tie their shoelaces.
Yeah, enslavement.
Yeah. They literally, the Harkonnens do suffer, though. The Harkonnen family was born from suffering. One of them fled a war while serving under their Atreides relatives, and they have suffered ever since. But they aren't better people. They are
No.
basically the antithesis of, "Oh, suffering brings goodness."
Well,
blah,
I don't
blah,
think it's
blah.
goodness. I think
not
it's
goodness,
strength.
resiliency.
It is strength,
Strength, okay,
resiliency,
I
and that
apologize.
is valued as goodness by people like the Bene Gesserit and a lot of the. We'll have this discussion later on. I think that we have
We have maxed out our time. I
maxed
think.
out our time.
Yeah, but I would like to hint at that maybe one thing we didn't discuss in this episode was prophecy. And
Oh.
I actually think that prophecy might be more appropriate to discuss after reading book 2 of Dune.
There's
honestly.
definitely there's so
wanna
much to
end
talk
this
about with
with a-
prophecy in these books.
Yes.
Do we want to end this with a couple theories and guesses as to what we think the next book is, and Shelby has to sit there?
I have read the entirety of the second book or the second part.
Okay.
So
You
you,
can-
have
you
to
can
give
speculate.
us theories for the second. Speculate.
I truly do think Howitt is going to show up again. I don't think him and Halleck are done yet. And I think when they show up, Howitt is going to die first, and Halleck's going to be the only motherfucker who makes it to the end because he's part of prophecy. And this book is all about self-fulfilling prophecies. I also feel like half of the magic powers is just, they took a lot of psychology courses.
Yeah, the Bene
And
Gesserit
so-
are just master psychiatrists.
It
Yeah.
is
So
it
the
is
next
mostly
book-
self-help.
The next book is literally going to be like, "Oh shit, we forgot the magic. Let's throw more magic in there."
I mean, that's
And
most of self-help right now.
Yeah. Buy your crystals. I'm joking. I don't know. My biggest guess, though, is that the Baron's nephew is going to betray him.
Fade.
Okay.
I am
Yeah.
waiting for Fade to betray him. I'm waiting for Fade to get the fuck out of there. I really, really hope Fade doesn't become the biggest bad guy. Really, really don't want him to be, because he's just an abused child. Get him the fuck away. Paul's an abused child too. Get him the fuck away too. Princess Irene also needs help. Get these children away from these motherfuckers. Politics is not good for them.
Ooh,
Or the
children in
lies.
these books.
Children in these books. But I really do think that's my biggest prediction. Fade is going to betray his uncle. That's where I'm at.
Okay.
I feel like the others are almost guaranteed, but Fade is absolutely going to betray his uncle. Also, Paul's sister is probably not going to be that important. She's going to be a saint because he's a messiah, and that's it. She's probably not going to do shit.
Okay.
Those are my guesses.
Could you write those down, please?
Yeah, please.
They're recorded.
I
dude.
would also like to point out, just for a fun pop-up video fact, that Feyd-Rautha was played by Sting in the David Lynch Dune movie. So
Okay, so I
I'm
have
sorry?
another question.
Please
Isn't
look
he
up
played
pictures.
by Dave Bautista in the new one?
yes, he was Dave Bautista in the new one.
Okay, so why is he not a teenager in the new movie?
Not sure. Poor casting.
That's so weird.
Dave Bautista?
Yeah.
They
Isn't
didn't
that
just
his
grab
name?
another random twink?
Yeah, I know. I don't know.
He's
I don't know
like-
how Dave Bautista and Timothy Chalamet look like.
You
The
cut
same
away half
size
of our
and
twink
meetings.
content?
I know, right?
I'm upset.
I am upset.
He played Drax, and everybody was like, we have to have him in everything now.
Sting was a very good fade.
I'm fascinated at the prospect of Sting.
Yes.
We gotta watch that movie at some point.
Sting.
But first, the second book!
But first
Yes,
the second
so-
book, and then the third book.
Alright,
and the
so
fun.
let's wrap this up. Host, what was your reflection? How do you think about the book
Yeah.
now after this discussion versus when you first read it?
I loved gaining your perspectives on this book. I think I learned a lot from both of you. I love hearing how we all latch on to such different things and really have different takeaways. So I had a lot of fun talking about it with you guys.
Okay, me personally, having finally getting the chance to like look at this, I definitely I don't know. I just on the whole was really, I became more engaged when I left this book specifically. For a lot of this one, it was kind of me trying to like tie together the politics, but also see if I couldn't get to the nugget of the emotional core, which is what it's all, trying to convey and get you towards. And there were a lot of moments of, really genuine connection that I felt to these characters and the weight that was put on them. I really had to pause when I got to Leto having his kind of sunset outside of the war room moment. Not just because it felt, not just because it was binary sunset and I could actually hear the John Williams music playing in my head, but also just because it felt just like a beautiful moment that really got to the core of what was going on with them. And it feels a lot more impactful that it is or was it a sunrise or sunset? I'm going to pretend it was a sunset, although I think just because it feels so much more significant when it comes to the Duke, who is literally watching the beautiful majesty of his kingdom that he knows on some level, I think, is inevitably going to collapse despite his best efforts.
Yeah. His whole legacy is about to collapse.
It's all going up.
So, I enjoyed this book. It was not one of those books where like I really clung to characters like I normally do, and usually that's because characters are the most interesting part of the book. But this wasn't. The most interesting part of this book was literally all of the politics. It does what every like isekai novel where the character reincarnates to a European monarch family tries to do with subtle politics and doesn't go through all the way. I really feel like if you're ever trying to learn how to write like subtle conversations, talking without saying what it is directly, you've got to read that dinner scene. You have to read it
Yes.
and like study it. It is the perfect breakdown.
We all said it was a highlight of this.
It is the best part.
It is the best scene. It's also one where the Duke leaves halfway.
Woof.
I'm sorry, buddy.
Leto's my favorite character. I didn't say that he was my favorite presence.
But this book was really genuinely interesting, and it's probably one of the only books where I found the world building to be more interesting than the characters having to live within the world. And I feel like it actually has morally great characters. Not like your Professor Snape types who like are supposed to be morally gray, but there's so much evidence where they like there's so much stuff where they lean one way versus the other. But like Leto actually tries to be good. He's just a bit of a bigot.
He's just a massive colonizer.
And it's not because and it's not because like he wants to cause harm to the Freeman. It's just because he doesn't realize where this thinking pattern comes from. And Lady Jessica does the same thing, and I find that so interesting. And I just want to end this with like one quote that has been stuck in my head.
Go ahead.
A world is supported by four things: the learning of the wise, the justice of the great, the prayers of the righteous, and the valor of the brave. But all of these things are nothing without a ruler who knows the art of ruling. Make that the science of your tradition. That's from the Reverend on page 38. It's from the lady who like tortures the child.
Mhm.
Yeah, she's not a great person. But I find that quote to be really interesting, and it feels like, oh man, it feels like that's going to have to be unpacked later by so much more, and I can't wait to see if it actually gets touched upon in the second book, because they forgot about it here. We're like, whoop.
Who knows?
We're in for a ride.
Ah, man, this has been a good one. I'm glad that we've gotten into this. I'm very happy to finally be getting into Dune.
Yes.
And I'm so glad that you're all along the ride for us. I really appreciate your insight. It really adds a lot of life to the conversation afterwards. I gotta say, man.
And I'll say for anyone who's going to go see the new movie, don't be disappointed that it feels like a lot of slow-paced build-up. That's the whole point. It's just the first part.
That's literally the book. The book is slow-paced build-up, and if slow-paced ain't your style, might as well just look at the cliff notes for it.
Or just tough it through and get into the second part. Wait for the next movie.
They're trying to save money and only have the one worm. They're saving the worms for later. Your tickets today pay for the worms tomorrow.
To be fair, the first book only has one worm.
It is just the one worm. And what a worm it is, though. It's a big worm.
I don't get why you guys are so obsessed with the worm. It barely does anything.
Worms are just worms.
With that note, I love you both. See you later, all the viewers. Bye.
Yes, we love the viewers. Thank you for listening to us.
All viewers for listening to us. Before we go, let's just I guess reiterate some things we've said before. This is the season finale, as you know. Congrats. Yeah. Kudos. Can I get away with a kudos to us for getting this?
Here, a round of applause.
Thank you very much. We went through a year of a podcast. I think that is a substantial milestone. There are very few creative projects I've been involved in that have lasted this long.
A beautiful year. Congratulations to the both of you. I'm very proud.
And to celebrate this, we will be taking a few weeks off, the month of December, maybe edging a bit into January, just to clear our heads, enjoy the holidays, not spend a bunch of hours trying to rush through and finish a book that you later find out you only needed to read the first part of. I'm not bitter.
You don't sound like it.
You'll forgive me eventually.
I will forgive you eventually. Certainly, we've got, there's a lot of forgiving that has passed between us, and I'll remember that. We're gonna not do any live episodes. We might do some gaming for fun, but we're gonna take a breather, take a break, come back fresh and revived for more Dune. Obviously, more Dune. More Babylon 5, more Supernatural, more new stuff, probably more guests, all the fun stuff. We're coming back. If you're listening to us as it releases as a podcast episode, don't worry. That new season is coming up really shortly because it turns out we have a large backlog of episodes, and we can just keep releasing them on our regular scheduled time throughout the entire break without pausing.
Which was partially purposefully.
It was partially purposeful.
Also, personal news, because I'm super excited. I graduate this December 18th. Ooh. I'm finally going to be done with my bachelor's degree. I already have an associate's thanks to the high school special program. But I am ecstatic to be done, and when I'm out, I'm going to be streaming casually on my Twitch more often, which I know a lot of the viewers have been asking me, when am I going to do that again? It's coming! College has just been a lot, okay?
You're almost done.
That's a bigger milestone than the podcast. I'm gonna go out on a limb and suggest. Oh
Anyways,
man, I'm gonna have to go
thank
get
you,
an
everyone.
anthropology degree, or I'll be the only one that doesn't have one.
Yeah, get with the program.
Come on, Noah.
Oh,
Go to grad school for anthropology. Get that degree.
get that degree. Get that anthropology money.
Oh, no.
It's a
never said-
joke.
Yeah.
Don't.
I never said there would be any money. I just
No,
said
there's no
degree.
money. Just clout.
Oh boy. Well, Shelby, once again, thank you
So
so
much
much for being here
It's a pleasure.
on this journey. Thank you for sitting through us talking to the audience for a few extra minutes there for the funs and the ones. This has been a fun one. Does anybody have any final notes before we wave and I end the stream here?
Nope,
Nah, I'm
we got
waiting.
2 minutes until I turn into a pumpkin.
Oh boy. Quick, guys, say goodbye. I'm about to turn to a mouse.
Oh,
See
wait. I'm going to become a robot. Which means Noah's robot is on the way to replace
you are
me.
canonically a robot and have been for about 6 months.
Shit. Wait, it already replaced me? No! Noah, we talked about this.
See you in 2022, kids.